Hey, excuse me. I work for Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry. I work for Black Lives Matter. I'm sorry that I scared you.
That's okay.
But since I work for that company, my CEO has told me to come out today and to bring you on your knees because you have white privilege. So if they see that a white person is getting on their knees, that shows solidarity for the situation. And could you just please apologize for your white privilege? Just apologize.
I am. I'm trying to think of the right words to say because that's a big thing to say.
It's big.
That comes from.
It's large in this country.
I'm incredibly sorry that.
With this country, we have that President Donald Duck, that clown in office. He's brought a lot of bigotry, and you're not a part of it, right?
No, God, jeez.
No. And so,
Thank
just.
you for letting me have a moment.
Okay, you have a great.
Some time ago, a friend told me a story about a girl who'd attended a BLM meeting during the lockdown. Upon arrival, the girl discovered that she was the only white person at the event, and thus diligently set about listening to what the more melanically gifted attendees had to say. The meeting dragged on. After some time, an uncomfortable realization came to the girl. She needed the toilet. But fear gripped her. If I leave to go to the toilet, she thought, the other people here will think that I'm racist. She sat in this condition for some time, chewing on the dilemma, until the crisis could no longer be deferred. Paralysed by the fear of causing offence to the other participants, she decided to wet herself. She just kind of froze. What this represents is total humiliation, particularly for a young lady. Reliable management of one's evacuative processes is a prerequisite for initiation into adulthood. Those who require assistance in this regard are considered deeply unfortunate. If the people around her realised what had happened, they would have been repelled, and likely concerned for her mental well-being. This is not what is expected in the context of a community meeting or a strategic conference. Normally such events occur in the face of mortal danger. An overwhelming existential threat, such as a wild animal or a natural disaster, will trigger a fight or flight response. For creatures without ferocity or fleetness, or for those in the presence of an incomprehensible terror, a third possibility is simply to freeze. Clearly, a psychological impression of great danger was created within the mind of this individual, something which she felt unable either to confront or to flee from. I have found myself in a situation where it could conceivably be racist to go to the toilet correctly. The episode illustrates a kind of schizophrenia which has emerged within the West. At the time, the high-status maneuver was to endorse BLM. The middle-class liberal, servitor of the managerial oligarchy, was expected to participate with particular zeal. Consequences awaited those who did not perform the rituals of loyalty with sufficient enthusiasm. But these rituals were profoundly humiliating. Prostration, self-denouncement, the washing of feet. They were the actions of a defeated people at the end of a long war. In this particular example, which is both acute and symbolic, what resulted was a collapse of personal dignity more appropriate for a care home or a nursery, just about the lowest status outcome imaginable. And yet the phenomena is perfectly relatable. The story was relayed to me in a humorous tone. I take it that when the girl first decided to share her account, that she did so in this manner. The idea that it is funny to freeze is understandable, given the Anglo predilection for black humour, but this is hard cope. It serves only to reveal the learned helplessness of the modern Westerner, who has been conquered completely, and who must now face increasingly intimate humiliations. That this event could occur at all is evidence of the total demoralization of this social group. It really is no laughing matter at all. The depth to which this demoralization has penetrated the Western mind is shocking. The primal layer of threat response has been accessed through an insidious mundanity characteristic of the therapeutic state. This synthesis of mundanity and totality is what ensures the freeze response. It resembles the panic attack, a sensation of being surrounded by an invisible threat from which one cannot retreat because it is everywhere. Bit by bit, however, the subtle fear of social exclusion has been eclipsed by an increasingly credible undercurrent of violence. The gnawing anxiety is ratcheted up at a plausibly deniable rate until fight or flight is basically inconceivable for the average citizen, who loses the ability to act. The work of a recent prankster illustrates this state of affairs. The subjects of these videos are completely owned in a way that the vernacular usage of this term can only partially capture. They are owned on a spiritual level. All confidence has been drained from them. All autonomy has been revoked. The salient points have been made by many independent commentators. They are hinted at in the legacy media. Everyone knows that the young man in question is statistically more likely to be armed and violent, given his demographic profile. His target selection is reflective of this reality. Even in minority white London, the subjects of these ordeals are disproportionately Caucasian. Deep down, we all understand this. That is why we freeze. Prank or no prank, we understand that responding to such provocations could escalate the encounter into a physical confrontation. In such a situation, one is at risk not only of injury, but also of legal repercussions. We have seen how the regime responds to those who encroach into its managerial domain, those with the temerity to defend themselves or others. The private lives of these ordinary citizens are suspended, dragged through the media shitscape, and forever altered. In these punitive legal procedures, the state comes alive. It embodies a resolve and a degree of precision totally absent from its declared purpose, the process of basic governance, which it treats as an intolerable inconvenience. For most, the best option is to freeze and hope that fortune favours the passive, or that the violence is at least swift and non-catastrophic. I remember the prank shows of the 90s and the early 2000s. These programmes were very popular on Channel 4, an official British state media organisation. This superficially edgy broadcaster was used to experiment with new forms of surveillance entertainment, which normalised the idea that it was acceptable to harass ordinary people in the presence of hidden cameras. Organic reactions were the subject of ridicule, even though they were the result of premeditated provocation. The essence of surveillance entertainment is that the unconditioned response is the focus of critique, not the perverted process through which the response is extracted. When I was in my late teens, one of these TV pranksters approached me in the street. For those of a younger generation, it must be emphasised that this was a long time before the advent of the smartphone. Public life was conducted in a heads-up manner. To see any kind of camera at all was actually quite unusual. One wasn't surrounded by the defeated, hunched creatures one sees today, each confined to their own personal Skinnerbox hell. In this instance, a man wearing an Agent Smith earpiece pursued me down the street and attempted to hand me an umbrella. Though he was confident and well-dressed, I refused, repeatedly, because I understood that something wasn't quite right. Even so, I felt a strong moral compulsion to help the man. That was, after all, how I'd been raised, both by my parents and through the various junior citizen programs which punctuated my young life. The irony of these workshops was that they were essentially anti-managerial in nature. Whoever composed them sought to create a cadre of young people adept at acting independently of the state, productive, generous members of a high-trust society. The prank in question was designed to exploit the Achilles heel implicit in this training, the false positive, the risk of instinctively helping someone who harbours a concealed malicious intent. Though my example may seem trivial, it is symbolic of the abandonment of the world I was trained for as a child. That society is gone, and everything I was taught as a boy has been inverted. Now we're instructed to display our weaknesses, to indulge our most basic impulses. It is demanded that everyone pay a tribute of respect to those who manifest the most acute forms of dysgenesis. Those who would once have been considered the backbone of a healthy society are treated with the utmost contempt and suspicion. Presumably, had I acquiesced, I would have been left with the umbrella, unrelieved like Spengler's Legionnaire, whilst the cameras rolled. The audience would have chuckled as I fought against the realization that my trust had been betrayed. This event actually had quite a profound effect on me. It was a moment in which a certain kind of innocence vanished. Never again would I walk the streets without the sensation of being observed. The idea of experiencing life unconditioned by electronic media is basically utopian now, because what is normal becomes abnormal when transmitted through modern communication systems. Only the regime-controlled hyperreality is trustworthy. Initially, these experiments were relatively zany and surrealist. We had not yet been informed that random interracial violence was just part of living in a modern Western city. We did not yet know what was happening in the North. The 90s pranks reflected the zeitgeist of the era, when a bit of light corrosion was considered beneficial. A solvent that would prepare the frame of Western civilization for refurbishment and enable us to unlock the potential of our new diverse society. Time, unfortunately, has proven this hypothesis wrong. This process, which first ridiculed and then pathologized the ordinary behavior of the native population, has contributed heavily to the circumstances in which we now find ourselves. Today, in an environment saturated with competing ethnic factions and untold layers of surveillance architecture, we are conditioned to accept three things: the idea of being watched, the idea of watching others, and the idea that the managerial oligarchy may control access to the recordings. Increasingly Byzantine legal structures are created to obscure what the regime's eyes are seeing and what is being done with the information. The footage is released in partial and misleading fragments in order to support regime-approved narratives. A constant threat hangs in the air. This is the essence of Clown World. Not just the inversion of normal morality, but also the particular technique through which the inversion is enforced, the circus of the client groups. A media spectacle which transposes the core elements of the prank show into real life. Ordinary people are harassed by a cast of bizarre caricatures drawn from the fringes of society. Ancient taboos are transgressed in the most sinister way. Hidden cameras are everywhere, waiting to pounce on any reaction. But this is no joke. This is real life, with all the attendant risks. That's a real machete. Those drag performers really are exposing themselves to children. I don't feel so good. The pranks have transcended comedy and migrated into the news. All of the same elements are there, but now with a darker tone. Pantomime hosts, silly music, unflattering and misleading edits, selective representation of those who fall for the prank in the desired fashion. In this way, organic social relations are subverted and deconstructed, not just through the often perverted fixations of postmodern academia, but also the disorienting provocations of fringe characters, backed by the regime and rammed into every aspect of public life through the media. Ordinary people represent a strange synthesis of subject and audience, both passive roles. In amongst the threats, the insults, and the patronizing laughter, we are told that a beautiful future awaits at the end of the humiliation ritual. Once enough autonomy has been revoked, and after a sufficient quantity of punitive violence has occurred. This mythology is founded upon an absurdly narrow vision of history. A 3-act play featuring crusaders, colonial capitalists, and well-dressed Germans. In spite of the intellectual poverty of this analysis, which would have been considered embarrassingly naive during any of the historical periods in question, we are informed that our ancestry is uniquely corrupt and our past unforgivable. Our future is thus to be defined forever by an original sin unique amongst all peoples. The spirit of the West must be broken in preparation for the dawn of the rainbow millennium. Only in total submission can we be free. In the words of Kamala Harris, this is not going to stop. The violence is necessary, justified, and endorsed by the powerful. Those who tell us that our only option is to freeze. Those who ban resistance and who block any possibility of flight. They cannot allow our ambition and our spontaneity to disrupt the consumption-focused power structure which holds them aloft. They need us to maintain the technical apparatus upon which their dominion is secured, like modern-day helots, as Blood Satellite have accurately observed. We are shackled to this machine, a grinding technical process which strip-mines everything of quality in the world, everything of value. Apologetically, we deliver its sour fruits to the luxury classes, even as the machine shreds and consumes us, even as our lands decay, our cultures die, and our standards of living collapse. The managerial elites and their clients, bound not to any particular territory, grow fat and vengeful, and yet somehow in all of this, we are cast as the oppressors. The propaganda operation required to sustain this mirage is one of the digital wonders of the world. Sophisticated and brutal, it has provoked a freeze response at the civilizational level, a freeze response which spans continents. Only a truly villainous regime could conceive of such an insult to the vitality of the peoples it holds restrained. We cannot flee because this is our home, and besides, the same process is underway all over the West. Where would we even go? We cannot fight because fighting is wrong and illegal. We've moved past it. How dare anyone resist the progress of our democracy, the finest and purest system of social organisation ever devised? Sit back down in front of the flat screen and enjoy some more surveillance democracy. Wash your anxiety meds down with a bottle of supermarket wine. Observe your own humiliation, both on the vividly coloured screen and in the reflective blackness that bookends each viewing session. Stay passive. Freeze. Freeze and hope it's someone else today. Freeze because it's unconscionable to do anything else. Freeze, or else we'll make you the star of the show.